Over the past couple of weeks, I've spent over 100 hours playing Monster Hunter Wilds. I've hunted every monster, crafted all kinds of weapons and armor, and I'm just now finishing up my endgame sets. So in this video, I'm going to be reviewing how much Monster Hunter Wild has changed the Monster Hunter formula, and if it is worth it for you to get this game whether you are a veteran of the series like myself, or a brand newcomer, by going through elements such as the story and narrative, how the combat feels and how much it has evolved, how good is the core progression and the endgame loop, and all of that without spoilers. I won't be showing any high rank footage, and will only be able to show gameplay of a few select monsters from the early game portion of Wilds due to the embargo rules imposed by Capcom. It is for this reason that you won't be seeing as much weapon variety in my own gameplay, as I didn't really play around too much with different weapons up until I finished the game, though I will still be able to talk about all of them. So with that being said, let's get started. Now, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest headline for Monster Hunter Wilds was the fact that it was the very first open world Monster Hunter game. Having these massive open spaces that are filled with great detail, tons of smaller secrets, hidden passages and shortcuts to get from one point to the next, allows you to feel immersed as you explore these vast open lands. Gone are the days of segmented areas separated by loading screens, and the sheer scale of it all in Wilds feels like a massive leap for the franchise, especially as you are able to go from one entirely separate area to the next, being able to effectively go from the very starting point of the game up until the final region without a single loading screen in the middle. And of course, due to all of the monsters as well as the endemic life that populates these different regions, along with the dynamic weather system of Monster Hunter Wilds, truly encourages exploration, as you want to see how much each of the different regions are going to change depending on the weather that is currently active. And naturally, as you explore the different maps, you'll come across these settlements and villages where you'll be able to interact with all kinds of NPCs, with some of them being able to trade items with you, and as you help them out and do quests for them, they will be able to provide even more valuable items as well as ingredients that you'll be able to use in your canteen to make the best meals possible. And if you build your trust with these settlements far enough, they'll even be able to offer you a special meal eventually, which will provide you with a ton of buffs while having an increased duration. Speaking of which, because of the new open world maps, and you likely spending a lot of time simply exploring them, the way that the canteen works has changed in Monster Hunter Wilds. You no longer have an actual canteen, but you can still cook at the base camp or at any of the pop-up camps that you're able to set up in multiple different areas of the maps that allow you to fast travel between them. And you don't really unlock ingredients by doing quests, but you more so obtain them by playing through the game, trading for these ingredients with different NPCs, and you'll be doing this multiple times as these ingredients are actually consumable. I personally prefer the old style of the canteen, where you would be able to unlock different ingredients by doing special optional quests. Though that being said, I never felt that I needed to be careful not to spend my ingredients, as I was always able to prepare the more powerful special meals that came with a lot of benefits. Though going back to the open world nature of the game, because you're going to be spending a lot of time exploring the maps, these food buffs don't just last for a single quest or up until you cart. They actually have a fixed duration, ranging from 30 minutes to 50 minutes, allowing you to do multiple quests at once, all of them with the buffs from a single meal active. And I personally like that a lot because it rewards players that are good at the game and are able to finish quests quickly, while also not punishing the players that aren't as good at the game. And of course, the way in which you will be exploring the map is going to be on top of your trusty Sacred, your animal companion that you're able to ride everywhere, and is honestly a lot of fun to control. But that being said, I didn't quite use the manual control feature of the Sacred as much when I was initially going through the story of the game. That is because of the sheer scale of each different map. I was never too familiar with each location, so I opted instead to go for the auto ride option on the Sacred, which allows you to simply automatically ride towards the target of your quest, and the Sacred will take you there. On one hand, this led to me not really knowing too much about the maps as I finished the campaign, but at the same time I was always free to go around and explore as much as I wanted, which I ended up doing a lot of once I finished the story of the game. Speaking of which, it's time for us to talk about the story. Leading up to the release of Monster Hunter Wilds, it was clear that a lot of the marketing for this game centered around its narrative and the characters all being a huge part of the game. It's no secret that narratives in Monster Hunter have ever been a huge focus, and in many cases it's actually a bit of a meme where people don't really care about the story of these games. They're usually just a way to set up conflict between you and the monsters, getting you from one monster to the next more powerful one. basically serving as a vehicle to the game and not really a true component that players would often look forward to, with 4 Ultimate being a key distinction and standout story among a list of weaker narratives. That being said, I do believe that Capcom has done quite well this time around, as while the overall narrative of the game isn't really anything too special or out of the ordinary, I do believe that they were able to put so much personality built into the different characters that you meet throughout the story, especially the main companions, that you are actually invested in how they feel about everything and want to progress the story to see the big new set pieces, but also how each character is going to react to what is happening. The characters this time around are so much more involved, and it really helps sell the idea of you being an actual hunter of the guild and having all of these infrastructures in place that are very important to the job of a hunter as part of a research commission. As a hunter, you are assigned the job at the beginning of the game to go to the Forbidden Lands and try to find out as much about this region as you can. Doing so, you are accompanied by your own handler Alma, the beloved Smithy Gemma, and a young boy that you end up rescuing by the name of Nada. That is basically the core team that is always going to be accompanying you on your quests, and it really surprised me that at some points even Nada and Gemma would be accompanying you in a quest, though naturally not actually taking part on the hunt themselves, and Alma would always be following you in her own secret, commenting on some of the things that are happening, and she doesn't just hide as soon as a cutscene starts whenever you find a new monster. You are also accompanied by a group of agents belonging to the Astrum unit, basically a second team also comprised of a hunter, a handler, and a smithy, those being Olivia with Athos as her palico, Eric as the handler, and Werner the Bum as a smithy. And again, it's this attention to detail, having a whole second team to explore the Forbidden Lands with you, that allows for a much more dynamic narrative, where sometimes Olivia and her team are going to explore a different part of the map, or they're going to be fighting on a different end of the map a different monster, but once they are done, they'll be able to join with you to help you on your quest. And as you play through the game, you'll come to learn a lot more about these characters, learn about their motivations, more about their personality, what they like and dislike, and you even get these heartfelt conversations at some point where you're able to ask more about these characters and their background. Now, I'm not saying that Monster Hunter is getting to Final Fantasy levels of storytelling, but it is clear that a lot of effort has been put into trying to make these characters a lot more likable and allowing you to be much more invested as they are more involved in the story, and I do believe that Capcom did a good job in doing so. And naturally, you also get your Palico companion, which this time around, not only are you able to customize him, but you can actually decide to make him speak. I know some players aren't big fans of that, but me personally, I actually enjoyed it a lot. Though I do have a small nitpick, as you can't disable subtitles, and their quips and voice lines can end up feeling repetitive over time, especially as this is a game that you will likely be able to play for hundreds and hundreds of hours, as you hunt different monsters, craft all kinds of weapons and armor, etc. Though my biggest criticism of the story in Monster Hunter Wilds is that at times it felt a little bit too much like a railroad, as they keep feeding you a new objective to do right after you finish a quest, always moving from one point to the next, and always feeling like you are in a constant period of go go go, going from passing through multiple different regions, and at times it feels like you could have used a little bit more time in each of the different locales. Now, at any point in the story, you're able to finish a quest and go do optional quests or just explore the map, but as I said, it feels like you are put in a railroad, as once you finish a quest, you are brought back to base camp and put in front of all of the characters, that by talking to them, you'll be able to initiate the next portion of the story. But of course, we can't be talking about Monster Hunter without talking about the monsters, and in a lot of ways, I'm very happy with the roster of monsters that we have in Monster Hunter Wilds, as we don't just have brute and flying wyverns, we also have leviathans, temnocerans. It really feels like a lot of the focus in Wilds was trying to give us a roster that was a lot more colorful and fun, rather than something more serious and dreadful, and honestly, I'm very appreciative of this. I feel like it's something very refreshing, and I hope that they keep this up with the title updates. Now, as far as how many monsters are in the actual game, without spoiling anything, I would say that it's in the ballpark of around the same amount as in Monster Hunter World, but with how differently each of these monsters fights from each other, with some of them having some really impressive standout designs such as Lalabarina, Nu Udra, or one of my favorite new monsters, Arkveld, you won't be getting bored of them for a very long time. And thankfully, even after you beat the game and get into the endgame, there's actually incentives for going and hunting some of these weaker monsters, which allows for a fresher experience that is a lot more enjoyable in my opinion. Now, Monster Hunter has always had a ton of detail at selling the animations of these monsters and making them as believable and realistic thick as a squid covered in oil that can shoot fire can be. And they made sure that their attacks reflect this, as they're able to properly convey each of the different monsters' personalities, while also giving even the sillier monsters some very powerful and cool attacks. Now that being said, I do have a point of contention here with the monsters, and that is when it comes to their actual difficulty. Because truth be told, I actually didn't get to see a lot of the different monsters' moves the first time around. That is to say that while the monsters' designs are innovative and their patterns engaging, the game's lack of difficulty means that ultimately they won't leave much of an impression on you until you get around to hunting them back again in high rank. It's like they built this really cool roller coaster, but instead of letting you ride it, you can only admire it from a distance. These monsters are awesome, their animations are fun and flashy, but when it comes to the difficulty, the game is simply lacking. Especially if you are a returning player, you'll be able to easily take down the monsters as you play through the story in 5 minutes or less. I personally didn't have to craft a different armor set up until I finished low rank, because there simply wasn't a need to. Now of course low rank is meant to be the early game portion of Wilds, basically a tutorial for new players to get better at the game and giving them a chance to learn the controls and how to use the more complicated weapons. I do understand that, but I do feel like we do miss some of the things that we had in the previous games, like for example even in World, you would be able to fight against a Kirin early on, and if you weren't prepared, that thing is going to kick your ass. I honestly didn't feel quite the same thing here, and I think it's a little bit of a shame because again, it undercuts the awesomeness of the designs and how they develop these monsters. And that is of course in part to the new combat mechanics and how much the combat has changed in Monster Hunter Wilds. New to Monster Hunter Wilds are a lot of combat features, and by far the one that is the most pronounced is the focus mode, where basically by holding down the left trigger or simply pressing it if you make it a toggle, you'll be able to gain a reticle on screen that allows you to redirect and aim where your attacks are going to land, while also making it so that the monster's wounds would glow, with wounds being a monster part that you keep attacking multiple times, will then create a fresh wound that allows you to deal extra damage by hitting that part. And while in focus mode you can perform what is known as a focus strike, a more powerful flashy move that when performed on a wound will consume it, but will allow you to deal much more damage and perform sand focus strike that in the case of a lot of weapons will help you replenish your own gauge. And I'm somewhat conflicted on focus mode. On one hand, I love the wounding system and I love how focus strike works, being rewarded for being precise and hitting the same monster part over and over again by creating said wounds and then exploiting those wounds to deal more damage to the monster and also make your weapon stronger is all a very fun and rewarding gameplay loop. But being able to redirect your attacks is a little bit crazy. For example, the greatsword can almost do a 360 turn, almost a full rotation as you are charging up your true charge slash. And that feels like it takes away some of the skill expression of the older titles, where you need to rely a lot more on your positioning and you couldn't just really be throwing out such attacks because you would risk missing them. It's still too early for me to decide whether or not I like focus mode, but at the very least I can say that I'm not a huge fan of the big reticle that you get on screen with it, though admittedly you can simply ignore that mechanic, albeit you would be putting yourself at a disadvantage. That being said, a couple of other very cool mechanics are power clashes, something that only the weapons with a shield can do, that allows you to block a monster's incoming attack and enter this fray where you are contesting with the monster, trying to overpower him as he lunges at you, and if you do succeed in being victorious in the power clash, you will knock it back and leave the monster vulnerable, giving you a big window of opportunity to deal big damage. That, along with now being able to perfect guard with any weapon that has a shield, including the greatsword, has made blocking a lot more fun and rewarding in this game. Another very cool feature is the offset attacks that you can perform as the monster is about to attack you, and if you time them right, you'll be able to essentially parry the monster and knock them back, kind of like you could with the power clashes. Some of these can be tricky to pull off, and not all weapons get an offset attack. But even so, you'll get some of the most rewarding moments that you can get out of the entire franchise by well timing a parry on some of the monster's strongest attacks. And as if that wasn't enough, you can also now bring two different weapons with you on a hunt. All it takes to swap between them is to hop on your sacred, press right on the D-pad, and now you'll have the secondary weapon that you have equipped, allowing you to take, for example, two pairs of dual blades, each with a different element, so that you have more coverage, or bring a ranged weapon with you when you otherwise wouldn't bring one, so that you can deal with flying monsters or put them to sleep or paralyze them. There's a lot of fun combinations that you can do, and I think that this helps making the game feel much more dynamic, that coupled with all of these other mechanics, lead to Wilds feeling like the perfect mix between the faster pace of of Monster Hunter Rise, and the slower, more methodical approach of Monster Hunter World. And of course, we can't exactly talk about weapons without talking about crafting and upgrading them as well as our armor. And I'm very happy to say that this time around the weapon designs all look amazing. Don't worry, I won't be spoiling them, but there are no slap-on weapon designs this time around, and I'm very happy for that. Your armor sets also look pretty fantastic, and in Monster Hunter Wilds you're actually able to equip both the male and female versions of the armor set on your character, giving you even more options to fully customize your hunter. That being said, I really like the way that they changed the way skills work in this game, as you're going to find skills on both weapons and armor, but not just that, the decorations that you're able to equip on the weapons and the armors can be mutually exclusive. That is to say that there are some decorations that you can only equip on weapons and some others you can only equip on armors. This limitation makes it so that you need to make a more conscious decision when it comes to creating your own mixed set, especially when you reach the endgame, but you'll be happy to know that decorations in Wilds are actually a lot easier to obtain, which leads me to talking about the endgame of Monster Hunter Wilds. And guess what? Investigations are back. You'll be able to unlock them once you reach high rank, and the way they do them in this game is a lot better. If you open up the map, you'll be able to see all of the monsters that are available for you to hunt, as well as a few others that are about to rotate into the map. From there, you'll be able to see the rewards that you can get from these monsters, and you can walk up to those monsters and hit them to initiate the quest, or you can save that investigation for later. So if you need to log out of the game or you want to do a different quest, whatever it may be, you can save those investigations for later that you're the most interested in, and whenever you want to, you can go talk to Alma and you'll be able to repeat them 3 times. These investigations will also have a chance of having 2 different monsters, which are the ones that you really want to aim for because they allow you to get many more rewards, and I really mean a lot more rewards. I'm talking about sometimes getting 20 decorations in a single investigation. And because the investigations you want to be doing the most have 2 different monsters, one of them is often going to be one of the weaker monsters like Congalala or Lalabarina, for example. And that is going to add to the variety of the game, because it's not always going to be hunting the same monsters over and over again. You will encounter monsters that you haven't hunted as much. Additionally, not only tempered monsters but frenzied monsters are also making a return, with them of course being more powerful, aggressive versions of each of the different monsters, though in the case of the frenzied monsters I believe they have slightly less HP, which is a nice nod to how the frenzy works. Tempered monsters in particular have this really cool mechanic where, because they are battle hardened monsters, they will often gain these scars as you battle them, effectively working as special unique wounds that only these monsters can get, that you can then of course exploit to your advantage. So you essentially get this risk-reward scenario with the tempered monsters because they deal a lot more damage and are much more powerful and aggressive, but at the same time, if you are aggressive yourself, you will be rewarded with even more wounds on the monsters. And naturally, by hunting these more powerful monsters, you'll be able to obtain better drops and better decorations. And some of these drops will also include materials that you can then use to craft what is called the Artian weapons, a special unique type of weapon that you can craft that is somewhat similar to how Kovtaroth and the Savijiva weapons work. Now, I can't say much more about this in my current review, but I will have an endgame review video where I will talk more in depth about those specific mechanics, so if you want to know more about the endgame of Wilds, stay tuned for that video. Ultimately, Monster Hunter Wilds feels like a very refreshing and very fun iteration upon the Monster Hunter formula, and while I was apprehensive at the idea of getting an open world Monster Hunter game, I find myself loving it, and I do believe that at least the endgame of Wilds has been the best high rank endgame that we have had in a very long time. I cannot put this game down, and I'm looking forward to putting in many more hundreds of hours into this game, and as you guys know, I am very biased towards Monster Hunter, but if you want to know whether or not you should get the game, in my opinion, definitely go for it. I do not think you are going to regret this. With that being said, thank you to Capcom for sending me a review copy, and thank you so much for watching. My name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting.